So I watched Oppenheimer yesterday, Christopher Nolan's most recent film, starring Cillian Murphy as the famous and infamous father of the atomic bomb. I sat there in a trance for 3 hours, jaw dropped, captivated. The film is, by all accounts, a fantastic and historical piece of cinema. But I have to admit, on first viewing, I felt both astonished and confused in equal measure. The confusion was challenging. Due to the scale of the film, I asked myself questions such as, who is that person? What is their role? What is the motivation of this hearing? What is the motivation of this hearing? I was lost in the density of the story. The politics and the context were perplexing and bewildering. Did Nolan expect his audience to have also read American Prometheus prior to watching his film? Is that a fair requirement? It does pose an interesting question. As a filmmaker, what duty do you have to make a complex story concise and digestible for a mass audience? Well, it depends. Are you making the film for your audience or for yourself? There are two types of filmmakers. There is Stanley Kubrick and there is Steven Spielberg. Kubrick's films don't care about the audience. They are intense works of art, full of metaphor and symbolism, designed to be looked at and interpreted, analysed and processed. Spielberg, on the other hand, despite a few exceptions, is a director that does care about his audience, rarely neglecting the traditional Hollywood conventions and character development of a story that compels just about everyone. Both filmmakers are loved, but for different reasons. With regard to Nolan, I'm beginning to notice a pattern in his filmography, a sort of one for him, one for us deal. Fundamentally, Nolan's an experimental filmmaker at his core, so rule-breaking films like Memento, Dunkirk and Tenet feel like films for him. These films are very much lacking in conventional Hollywood spirit, in favour of a colder and more clinical deconstruction of film and storytelling itself. Memento is an experimental noir thriller told backwards.
Best way to draw it is as a hairpin, like that. That's basically the end of the movie. This is colour, running backwards as a series of jumps. And what we do is we cut between the two the whole way through. So we alternate scene here, scene there, scene there, scene there, scene there, scene there, and they meet towards the end of the film.
In addition, Dunkirk is a war film like no other, communicated over 3 timelines: 1 hour, 1 day, and 1 week. Nolan decided to cast unknown actors to emphasize the lack of identity of a soldier. And finally, in Tenet, Nolan decided to call his protagonist the protagonist. He wanted to experiment with the idea, if the plot was big enough, does the character name even matter? Nolan does have films for us, of course. The Batman trilogy, Inception and Interstellar all have well-established powerful catharsis and character development. These films really make an effort to compel a mass audience. Yes, these films have experimental elements, but ultimately they are designed to feel satisfying for everyone. And you can often see Nolan's expositional attempts to keep the audience informed, sometimes more obvious than others.
There, but it's too far, right? Mm-hmm. So a wormhole bends space like this, so you can take a shortcut through a higher dimension. Okay, so to show that, they've turned 3-dimensional space into 2 dimensions, which turns a wormhole into 2 dimensions. A circle. What's a circle in 3 dimensions? Sphere. Exactly.
Then there's Oppenheimer. One for him or one for us? I believe this one was for him. He read a dense and complicated book and decided to pull no punches. He wanted to tell a deeply complex story with all the characters, all the bells and whistles, with lots of cinematic experimentation. He divided the narrative into subjective and objective perspectives, used epic and revolutionary images, visual warping, metaphorical and symbolic sound design, filled with compact dialogue scenes. And then he puts it out there. For him, a success. A film designed to bewilder and to be grappled with as a dense piece of work. A film closer to Kubrick than to Spielberg. A complicated film. People have been making comparisons to The Social Network, but there is one fundamental difference between the films. Fincher and Sorkin had the audience in mind. Firstly, despite the 162-page script, The Social Network moves quickly and lands perfectly on the 2-hour mark. Yes, the story is complicated, with rapid dialogue, 2 lawsuits, and 5 main characters all competing for recognition and glory. But Sorkin does what Sorkin does best. He dispenses with much of the external information and cuts through to one core and identifiable theme. Sorkin simplified the story to fit a 2-hour narrative, and Fincher designed it to be satisfying and accessible for the audience. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, each film has its own function, and it's up to you, the director, to decide what it is. You can either make a film with the audience in mind, not wanting to confuse and distract from the main narrative, or you can make a film in exactly the way you want to, and let the audience find a deeper meaning over time, through further examination. Nolan could have edited Oppenheimer down to 2 hours, clarified a much more understandable through line, and made it more accessible for a first viewing. But no. The density of Oppenheimer is part of its brilliance. Yes, it's confusing, but it stands alone in a different conversation as an enigmatic piece of art, one that wants you to go back, to learn more, and to discover hidden meanings. Yes, a flawed blockbuster, but also a historical masterpiece.
A difficult thing for an audience to grasp, or did it feel that it was something that people could grasp?
Well, it's like, fuck it, you know? I mean...